Good morning and welcome back to TVP World. My name is Alex Simlinski and you're watching World Talks. Now, in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, European security has been redefined. While military deterrence remains central, another line of defense is emerging from an unexpected source: wetlands. Restored marshes, peatlands, and floodplains not only absorb carbon and protect biodiversity, but can also act as natural fortifications, slowing troop movements, impeding heavy equipment, and complicated invasion routes. This intertwining of ecology and security raises urgent questions for Europe's defense and environmental policies alike. And with us to discuss this further is Wiktor Kotowski, the co-founder, Wetlands Conservation Center. Good morning and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So now, why are wetlands being discussed as part of Europe's security and defense strategy?
Wetlands have always served as a defense structure. So the reason that many wetlands, or some wetlands at least, have not been drained is that they were at the borders. This is the case for the Biebrza Valley, this is the case for the Olman Myers, now between Belarus and Ukraine, and many others around the world. So this has always been an issue and appreciated by people. We have settled next to wetlands originally as the species because they defended us against other nations and dangers, but also provided a shelter. And now it is indeed a very unique opportunity that we can use this argument, defensive role of wetlands, to restore them also for other ecosystem services and biodiversity.
So now, what makes wetlands particularly effective in slowing or maybe even deterring mechanized armies?
Well, that's pretty obvious. Yeah, they are difficult to cross because they are soggy, they are waterlogged habitats. There are obviously different types of wetlands. Some of them have water for part of the year, like floodplains, where rivers flood extensive areas. We have modified most of the river floodplains, cutting them from the rivers by dikes. Yes, these dikes prevent flooding so that we could use them, these floodplains, for agriculture, but then they lost this function. Yeah? So what has to be done in case of floodplains is to move the dikes or remove the dikes, but then adapting the agriculture so that mowing is done later after water retreat. The other type of wetlands that are particularly suited for defensive purposes are those that are waterlogged all year round, and these are peatlands. Peatlands are very special wetland types that accumulate organic matter, remnants of plants, because the water is there all year round, more or less, near the surface, not above, or just below. And that in these circumstances, plant remnants don't decompose fully, they accumulate as peat. Such soil is 90–95% water. So you can have several meters of soil where you can walk, where plants and biodiversity thrive, but you cannot cross it with any vehicle. Yeah, so that is actually what we need in case of mechanized army invasion, to prevent that they can enter and cross in any place along the border. Yeah, if we restore these wetlands, then the troops, the vehicles are forced to certain corridors which can be defended much more effectively.
So now, I'm curious, and I wanted to ask, can you tell us a bit more about the situation that happened in Lithuania in March, where there was the situation when a Hercules vehicle went missing with 4 American soldiers, only later to be found? So was this also a case, were these wetlands or were they maybe peatlands? And was that what made it tricky for these soldiers, and maybe they didn't know what they were actually getting into?
Yeah, apparently. Apparently they didn't know this type of habitat, which is pretty common in the Baltic states, also in northeast of Poland. Well, I haven't studied this site in particular, but this must have been a terrestrialized lake. Yeah, so some lakes grow up with peat-forming vegetation. They fill up with peat with time, but the ground is very soft. We call them quacking marshes, and you cannot drive with anything on such a ground, but it appears as a more or less solid ground. Yeah, you don't see water on the surface. So this must have been this type of a habitat. But any other peatland, yeah, this was a very severe case, very tragic case, because this very heavy vehicle drowned in the mud under the surface. This would not be the case for most of the peatlands, but in most of the peatlands, heavy vehicles would get stopped. They would get into the peat, into mud, and would not be able to drive. Farmers who operate on wet peatlands adopt their machinery to these special circumstances, use lightweight machinery on very broad tracks. So I can't imagine that this could be done for the army vehicles as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about, are there any specific examples from Ukraine where wetlands have influenced military operations since 2022?
Multiple. First, we all have seen on TV, on internet, Russian tanks drowned in mud, yeah, and in peat, which probably most people didn't recognize this peat. A large part of Ukrainian Polesia, especially, so the peatlands and wetlands which are on the way from Belarus to the south. So a large part, that part of Ukraine is covered with a different type of peatlands, and although some of them, even though some of them are drained and modified, that was a wet part of the year, and they were difficult to access, and therefore the tanks, the vehicles were forced into the roads where they were very easy target for the Ukrainian defense. Another example was the destruction of the dam next to, close to Kiev on Irpin River, and that was a different case, because wetlands were restored with actually a large economical loss and temporarily also large biodiversity losses, because they had to reflood areas that were not flooded for decades before. But that was also done to restore wetlands in order to regain their defensive functions. So you could probably find many more of such examples.
Mm-hmm. And what about, because we have spoken about, well, the positives of using these wetlands, peatlands for defensive measures, but is there a chance that framing wetlands as defense infrastructure, might that risk militarizing conservation, and then how do we balance both?
In fact, I see much more synergies than risks between conservation, biodiversity conservation, climate mitigation, and climate change adaptation, and military in this case. Wetlands are very high on the agenda now when it comes to European biodiversity policy and climate policy. We have historically drained most of them. Yeah, they were decades ago, or from the 19th century, they were considered wastelands. So they were drained in order to gain more land for agriculture, to make forestry more productive, or to simply get more access to the landscape. Actually, in many areas, the primary or the hidden agenda for wetland drainage was to gain more control on land to what was originally inaccessible. Yeah, only the local people knew how to navigate there. Now we know that this drainage had severe consequences for biodiversity. These are habitat types that are most endangered, which have the highest numbers of threatened plant and animal species. But these are also habitats that, when drained, turn from our allies in terms of climate protection, because peatlands absorb carbon dioxide from the air, and building peat, they store this carbon underground. But when we drain them, we turn them into a very potent CO2 sources. Yeah, when drained, this peat decomposes, and CO2 goes back to the air 20 times faster than it was accumulating before. So we need to restore peatlands for the climate, to prevent these very high emissions. This is about 5% of EU greenhouse gas emissions, and the stopping these emissions is pretty easy. You have to stop drainage. You have to block drainage ditches that are still there, that were built decades ago. But you have to do something with for the farmers who own them. Most of these areas is not anymore wasteland. It's not nobody's land. It's land that is used by the local farmers. So you need to compensate, or you need to help these farmers transform from drainage-based agriculture to wetland agriculture. And this is a very important trend nowadays, both in agricultural science and increasingly in practice. Yeah, turning peatlands from drained lands where farmers have to fertilize, but the access is easy, where we lose biodiversity and which are potent greenhouse gas sources, to wet agriculture, which has more biodiversity, especially around, because you, at the same time, you recreate wetlands around such wet agriculture areas, and which bring new type of gains of benefits for farmers, because we need biomass nowadays. Rewetted peatlands can produce a lot. So this wet agriculture, called paludiculture, from palus, wetlands and agriculture, is something that we should especially look into when thinking about restoring this wetland belt along eastern border of Poland.
So now, would you say then, based on what you've just told me, looking ahead, can we say that wetland restoration is becoming a part of a broader European green defense strategy?
For sure, in the eastern countries, so in the countries at the eastern border of EU. Finland is thinking very seriously about it. Poland is thinking very seriously about it. The Baltic states are positive, although it seems not so deep into this discussion yet, but definitely yes. And in all cases there is synergy, because now we have to implement the nature restoration law, where peatlands are very high on the agenda. And we can prioritize those areas that are at the eastern border. So I see much more synergies than risks, but we have to do it together. I mean, conservation experts, wetland restoration experts, and defense experts have to work together to avoid mistakes on both sides. You can think that you are restoring wetlands, but you can remove water from the landscape, and then so there is risk. But with good planning, we can very quickly get gains for the climate, for biodiversity, and for prevention of the invasion.
All right, well, that sounds like the perfect moment to wrap it up right there. Wiktor Kotowski, co-founder, Wetlands Conservation Center, thank you very much for joining me here on TVP World this morning.
Thank you very much.
And with that, it's a wrap for this edition of World Talks. But for more interviews like this one and breaking news updates, make sure to stay tuned to TVP World.